And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Where is the time gone? We're getting closer and closer to the fantasy hockey playoffs. The trade deadline now in the rearview mirror, and we get set for all the action over the next couple weeks. Brought to you by our good friends over at Skip. It's time for another episode of NHL Fantasy on Ice, Week 21 Mailbag Edition. It's Nick Alberga and Jake Hahn with you. What's going on, Jake?
Nick, I'm feeling great today. The days are a little bit longer. This is when I come alive. This is the part of the sports calendar where I come alive. March Madness, NHL playoffs right around the corner. So we're entering into a fun time of the year. And of course, fantasy playoffs as well, which for a lot of people start next week, depending on your league. This episode is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.
It's like Jake Hahn and the Buffalo Sabres. We're going to show some fight. We're going to lose hockey games. We're going to show some fight. But, man, just watching the action on Wednesday between Detroit and Buffalo when Montreal's late collapse in OT, it was a wild night. Not many games, but it was a wild night.
Every night, I feel like specifically those Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, where we're pretty heavy in terms of the schedule, is probably going to feature a head-to-head matchup between two of those Eastern Conference teams. Maybe now all of a sudden the Western Conference race is getting interesting, Nick, with Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis, maybe even Utah in there. So I think most nights as a hockey fan, we're going to have one or two games where we're just like, okay, this is going to have that playoff feel to it, and that's the beauty of this part of the season.
Tell you what, too, the Calder race has been a lot of fun to watch transpire throughout this season. I thought Dustin Wolf was excellent for fantasy owners out there who snatched this guy off the wire in the first month. Congrats to you because he's been so good and might actually get this Calgary Flames team into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Lane Hudson continues up to 51 points, I believe, now in the season. Celebrini's in the mix. You can never doubt Michkov. It's a good race here.
It's a great race. Like usually by this point, we've narrowed it down to two guys, maybe three at the most, but we've actually got four that I would say have a pretty legitimate shot to build a case here down the stretch. I don't think anybody's sealed it up. And you mentioned the case for each guy, right? Wolf, Celebrini, Michkov, Lane Hudson as well. If Montreal all of a sudden wants to make a playoff push, I know they blew that game against Seattle on Wednesday night, but they still pick up a point there. 3 of a possible 4 points from their back-to-back situation. While we're on it, do you have one that you would pick right now? Nick, I think I'm still a Celebrini guy out of all this, but man, if Dustin Wolf gets Calgary in the playoffs, it's hard to argue against him too.
Man, this one's tough because even Lane Hudson, to do what he's doing at his age with that type of team is simply incredible. And I think he's underrated defensively, gets a lot of slack for the way he plays, but I think he's improved immensely defensively. But unfortunately this year, like he's going against Dustin Wolf, who's not getting enough love for what he's doing to be a goalie, a rookie goalie, and lead your team to a potential playoff spot is superb to me. But I think it's either Wolf or Celebrini for me. Like Wolf's the big one for me again. Everything I just mentioned. How about you?
Michkov's been too up and down, I think, for me, right? There was that great flash at the start of the season. Now he's kind of coming back around, and that we probably should have expected that in a Torts offense, right? He's not just going to hand the car keys over to anybody. I think with Lane Hudson, it might be difficult, especially if we're maybe looking at the defensive side of the game a little bit, but he is an exciting player, so I would probably tend to agree there. I think I'd still give the vote to Celebrini. He's been consistent. He's been solid. I don't factor winning in too much, especially for a guy that's coming into a rebuild the way that Celebrini is. They obviously didn't expect to win a lot of games this year, but like I said, if Calgary makes the playoffs on the back of Dustin Wolf, I think there's a very strong case to be made there for the Wolf man.
Jake, and speaking of NHL debuts and rookies, Artem Levshinov with Chicago makes his debut and obviously won't be a part of the Calder conversation, but I thought he looked pretty good. 3 shots on goal, played 20-55. What an opponent to start against Colorado. I don't know what it is. Ever since bringing in Spencer Knight, Chicago's been a reputable team now, and even making the Seth Jones deal looks like it's put some steam in that room. Bedard's been good, but what do you think of Levshinov's debut delivered by our good friends over at Skip with that mailbag question?
You know what I think it was, Nick? I think it was the comments from Seth Jones. I think the team was a little upset. Remember those parting words, the parting shot from Seth Jones? And look, he wanted out of there. He got exactly what he wanted. Not only did he get out of Chicago, but he gets to go to Florida with a legitimate shot to win a Stanley Cup. So Jones got what he wanted, but I have to think some of the guys in the room weren't exactly happy with some of those comments towards the end, especially especially knowing he was probably on the way out. And they do look a little bit more inspired. Bedard's looking like he's having a bit more fun. You mentioned Knight coming in. Now we're getting a look at Lev Shinov. And look, these are the stories as we get into fantasy playoffs, Nick, that we got to watch out for, right? The guy nobody's heard of, the rookie that's maybe getting a shot late in the season that gets a good line assignment on a bad team. Those are the sneaky moves, the pickups that can maybe push you over the edge in a really close matchup. So you got to be very wary of these things. Even though you may have never heard of the guy all season long, he could end up playing hero for you in your fantasy playoffs.
Not to mention a guy like Ryan Leonard at some point is going to link up here with the Washington Capitals. I don't know if it's going to be relevant to fantasy hockey, but certainly a guy I have on my radar, not only for the end of this season and into next season for sure. So you talked about Seth Jones. Aaron Ekblad hit with a 20-game suspension earlier this week. And obviously here in the fantasy space, we think about the ripple effect. And a guy you just mentioned, you have to be all over picking up, right? That's Seth Jones.
Seth Jones' stock is skyrocketing, I'd say, at this point, just based on what else is going on around him in Florida. And I do think, as much as the Blackhawks might be reinvigorated with Jones leaving in those parting shots, I think Jones is also reinvigorated because it's almost like that get-out-of-jail play. Like Dylan Cousins looks like he just got out of jail with the Buffalo Sabres and now ends up in Ottawa, right? I think Seth Jones, kind of the same thing. He's locked up there in Chicago, no winning, no light at the end of the tunnel, really, at least for the next couple of years. Now he goes to Florida, and I just think that reinvigorates the player. And say what you will about Seth Jones. Does he make too much money? Yes, he's probably not worth the contract that he was getting, but he's still a talented player. He's still capable of running a power play. You put him with the right guys, Nick. So I like the potential of Seth Jones to have a really nice finish to this fantasy season now. Not too concerned about the Aaron Ekblad injury for the Panthers. I think they're good enough. They can get by without Ekblad the rest of the regular season and probably still have a very legit shot to win that division.
All I'll say, just to push back on Jones, is like he's had so many opportunities in, say, the last 5 to 7 years to be that bona fide stud in fantasy hockey, and he hasn't elevated, man. He had a couple years there with Connor Bedard, a youngster Connor Bedard, and he'd have a couple stops and starts. He'd have like a couple points in a row, and then he'd go missing. I've looked at the file long enough to suggest I should temper my expectations. You obviously feel different, but that's the way I feel about Jones right now.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I've been burned by Jones personally many times, and it's a file I've kind of just stayed away from at this point. But I think I have interest in this potential just because, again, kind of that get out of jail aspect, that player getting a boost. How many times do we see this? A guy going from a really bad situation to a much better situation, and they just get a little reinvigorated. Maybe find that love of the game again. However you want to phrase it. I like the potential of Seth Jones here down the stretch, Nick. I think he's going to end up in a pretty good opportunity, especially with this Ekblad suspension in Florida.
Delivered by Skip, another mailbag question this coming. Should I drop Theodore, or is he coming back soon? I've been I've been getting a lot of people asking me that, and honestly, there really hasn't been a timetable. It looked like a broken wrist, not to speculate. They called it, I think, an upper body injury, but if you have an IR spot, crystal clear, obviously put him on there, but if you have to move on, you have to move on. I think we're at a time in the year where you can't wait around for guys to get healthy.
So I think I sent this question in because I have Shea Theodore. I need him bad right now, Nick. I am not getting much from my back end in that league. So I would love an update on this, and for them to say, oh, Theodore's skating and he's right around the corner. But personally, I've seen nothing in terms of an update. It's been very quiet. And look, Vegas, especially with the way that Pacific Division is shaking out right now, I think they can take their time with this one, right? Because Edmonton's not playing great hockey. Not to say that they have the Pacific locked up, but I think they feel pretty confident that they can lock it up without Shea Theodore. So there's really no need to rush him back. I think if you don't have the IR spot and you're absolutely desperate and you're going into your fantasy playoffs next week, I would actually probably drop him just because it doesn't sound like he's going to come back within the next couple weeks. But hey, if you have the IR spot, easy just to throw him there and hope you can get him back for the semifinal, final, something like that.
You really get the sense he's just chilling. A lot of other guys in the league, especially a team like Vegas, they're going to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and maybe I'm speculating way too much, but you're right. It's been really, really quiet ever since we didn't see him at the Four Nations again. Haven't really heard anything about him skating or him making a closer return, and maybe with the 10 games to go or 5 games to go, we suddenly see a guy like Shea Theodore appear. And again, it was really bizarre to me that we really didn't get that move from Vegas that we're customary to seeing at the deadline.
I was waiting for it, Nick. Fortunately for us, we got other big splashes, and Florida makes the move for Marchand. But I was waiting for, and Vegas, of course, sends out that tweet, the high tweet with like 10 minutes to go before the deadline. I'm like, this is going to be such a troll, probably, or they're going to make the biggest trade ever. So it ends up just being a troll, and Vegas having a little fun. But I think that tells you they feel pretty good about their roster, Nick. That they don't have to go out and make that big splash. That Mark Stone's healthy this year, and that they tinker with the middle six a little bit. They get Smith, they get Saad, and that's good enough. And I would agree with that, because I think that Pacific side of the bracket is theirs for the taking. We got another mailbag question here for you, Nick. I think this one's fascinating. Maybe for the now, for the fantasy playoffs, also a little bit for the future. Are the Anaheim Ducks guys, i.e. McTavish, Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlsson, Lacombe, Dostal, are they all must-own players in Keeper and Dynasty, or do you have concerns about their future? So is there anybody from that group that you're a little more interested in, maybe moving forward, Nick, than the others of this group of young Ducks?
Believe it or not, considering what I've said the last couple weeks, I'm going to hop aboard the Ducks Express. Although we've been waiting for this team to take that next step for years now, hasn't happened. Mason McTavish is a guy who entered the league with a lot of pedigree. He was involved in the Calder conversation to start his rookie campaign. Hasn't come to fruition, but much similar, I think you would agree, to Juraj Slafkovsky the last little while. McTavish starting to cook in a big way, and sometimes it takes guys longer than others. Maybe it takes them 15 games, 80 games, 2 seasons. We're starting to see the point production come from McTavish. I'm always weary of this because there's less pressure late in the season. The Ducks are not making the playoffs. Yeah. Whatever people want to believe here with this late run, they're not. So I'm going to hop aboard. Lacombe's a guy we talked about the last couple of weeks. Dostal's a guy we've talked about for the last couple of years, ready to take that next step. Carlson, it took him a while this year, but he's starting to cook a bit. Cutter Gauthier, same conversation. So I would say I'm lukewarm to warm. Different story than I was maybe a month ago, Jake. How about you?
Yeah, and I brought up McTavish quite a bit this year, even when he wasn't going, saying, okay, sometimes you just believe in the talent of the player, and we saw him, come in at a very young age and have success in the league, and then it kind of went the other way, which happens a lot. Like, guys have that instant success, and they can't follow it up, and it's a learning experience in a very difficult league. So I think McTavish is a very talented player, someone I would certainly have my eye on moving forward in any sort of dynasty keeper leagues. Cutter Gauthier, it's still very early, but it looks like he's not afraid to shoot the puck. If he could get some more minutes, it's pretty low in terms of the time on ice right now. And Leo Carlsson, we've talked about it before. I think the defensive responsibility coming into the league as a center is so difficult, and especially Anaheim asking him to be a 1C right away. That's tough. You're going to get some really difficult matchups. I think that hurts the offense a little bit, but he looks like a legit player, and I love Jackson Lacombe, Nick. I was wondering who's it going to be? Is it going to be Mitnikov, Zellweger, Lacombe? Who's going to be that stud power play guy on the back end? At least at the moment, it looks like it's going to be Lacombe.
The numbers check out since the Fowler trade. Lacombe's been a different player in terms of point production. So we got Tim Kalinowski of Snapback Sports coming up in about 10 minutes from now. But I thought it'd be a perfect time to play the first ever edition of Trust or Bust here on Fantasy on Ice. What do you think?
Oh, I love the sounds of this. Trust or bust. I don't know who to trust in this league anymore, Nick. Especially if this is goaltending related, then I'm in big trouble here.
It is. It's JCon inspired. We were conversing about criteria and what to talk about on today's podcast. And Jake brought up a good point. I mean, it's fantasy playoffs just around the corner. Which goalies do you trust, and which goalies are you just scared that they're just going to implode for you, and it's going to be a tough ending to your fantasy season? So I got a couple names, and we'll go back and forth here, okay?
Perfect. Hit me.
All right, trust or bust. Linus Ullmark of the Ottawa Senators. I will go first and say trust. This guy won a Vezina Trophy a couple years ago. We think he is healthy, and he is starting to stand on his head, so I like him down the stretch here.
I'm going to trust as well. I did cash a nice Linus Ullmark Vezina ticket a couple years ago, so he always has a special place in my heart, Nick. And when I know you watched it. I know you watch all these games. You saw that performance on Monday night against the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, he got the ski mask out and absolutely stole that game for the Ottawa Senators. And I honestly felt bad for Detroit because they've been goalied a few times over the last couple of weeks, and it might end up costing them a playoff spot here. So I felt for Detroit, who generated a lot of high danger chances and just couldn't get one past, or an extra one past Linus Ullmark. So I'm going to go with trust, Nick. When he gets locked in like this, we saw it really for a whole year in Boston. Different different situation, I think, behind this Ottawa team, but I trust Linus Ullmark to get it done for me in fantasy playoffs. Let's stick in the Atlantic Division. Another team making a sneaky push all of a sudden here, Nick. Sam Montembeault, Montreal Canadiens. Do you trust him, or is he a bust in fantasy playoffs coming up?
This one I'm on the fence on, but I'll just go with my gut. I'll say bust. I think it's been an up and down roller coaster type season for Samuel Montembeault. I know Montreal's playing well right now, but like a perfect example of what happened against Seattle. I know they were tired on the back-to-back, but they didn't really add at the deadline. There's some young players on that roster. When things get hard and heavy down the stretch, I think they're going to sort of implode a bit, so I'm going to go with bust. How about you?
I'm going to trust him. I might have to plug my nose a little bit on it. I actually do have him in a league, so I have no choice but to trust him based on what else is out there.
Yeah.
But simply because Montreal's been hot and cold, and they're a little bit hot right now. I know they let one get away, but that was on a second half of a back-to-back Wednesday night in Seattle. They took a couple penalties. Dobish was also in net for that game as well. So maybe not a good sign for Dobish that he gave up those late goals and then the overtime winner as well. It looks like it should be Montembeault's net here moving forward. So that's why I'm going to trust him. And you look, there's going to be some difficult matchups, but I'm going to choose to trust old Sammy Montembeault here, Nick.
How about Spencer Knight now with Chicago's look really, really good? And I'm not coming off my comments that he's going to be a top fantasy elite netminder in the next 2 to 3 years. He's been great with the Hawks. Trust or bust on Spencer Knight?
I'm going to sadly go bust here. I like Knight, and I like what he's done. And we talked about right off the top, right, about how Chicago has been a little bit reinvigorated. It's just so hard for me to insert a Blackhawks goaltender in my lineup in an important fantasy playoff matchup. I think the upside to it is, okay, they get outshot by so much. Maybe he gives up a couple of goals, but you get that save percentage, right, where there could be a little bit of a saving grace there. But I'm still going to go bust. I don't think I trust starting Spencer Knight in my fantasy playoffs, Nick.
I'm going to go with trust, believe it or not. I don't think the Hawks are going to win a lot of games down the stretch, but I think they're going to be in tight, low-scoring type games because their goaltending has been so strong the last couple games at least, and I believe in Knight, and I think he's going to have a good end to this season. And you talk about guys who fired up by a change of scenery. I know it's weird going from Florida to Chicago, but you're not pretty much a number one guy, Spencer Knight. Here are the keys to the car. Take them. Speaking of which, like a guy we talked about earlier on, I think we're both going to trust him, and that's Dustin Wolf in Calgary, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to agree on this one. Yeah. Dustin Wolf, trust. He's just given us no reason not to trust him, right? Throughout the course of the season, he's been so solid for Calgary. These games are going to be, every game is going to be important for the Flames down the stretch, and I think he's going to be the guy unless it's a back-to-back situation. This might be the ultimate trust or bust, Nick, and we might also agree on this one. But UPL of the Buffalo Sabres, obviously any goaltender on Buffalo is a bit of a tough sell, but he does get basically all the starts there. Do you actually trust UPL in any sort of fantasy playoff matchup over the next couple weeks?
Simple answer, no. You just never know what you're going to get for the Buffalo Sabres. This is not an indictment on UPL. I have no clue what Sabres team's going to show up. Pretty easy for me. How about you?
I know it's tough. I want to trust him because at times this year he's actually been pretty good. He will flash a decent start every once in a while, but I don't know if that's something you could bank on in an important fantasy matchup, Nick. So I just feel like if you fire him up that Monday or Tuesday of your fantasy playoffs, he gives up 5 or 6, you're already fighting your goaltending categories all season long, and it just looks like Buffalo has basically thrown in the towel at this point. I don't get the feeling that the Sabres are going to play those. Remember those meaningless Sabres games at the end of the year, right? They're out of the playoffs. They win games. Okay, now we get excited for next year. I don't get that sense this year. I think that this team is just cooked. They're defeated, and they're ready for the off season at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've been saying that for like 15 years now. This time of year, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, Elvis Merzlikins, trust or bust, Jay Con?
I'm going to lean towards trust here. I don't love it. I'm not running to go start Elvis Merzlikins at this point, but I think there's enough there with that team and what they've been able to do. They can be leaky. They can certainly give up their fair share of goals, but they're feisty. They win some games. So just based on what else is out there, some of these other goaltenders that we're talking about, Nick, I got to go trust on Elvis here.
I'm going to go bust. I've honestly stayed away from Merzlikins all season long. He hasn't had a good year. Like, that's been the story with Columbus. They score a lot of goals, but he's got a 3.04, 896, an easy fade for me. No thank you. I want good goalie categories. I know he's going to get you wins, but that's about it. And last but not least, trust or bust Frederik Andersen of the Carolina Hurricanes, Jake.
I'm gonna trust Freddie, which is famous last words, trusting yes. Frederik Andersen. But this is short term we're talking here. It's usually long term where you can't trust Freddie, right? Going into a season, is he going to be healthy? Can he play the full season? Usually the answer is no to that question. But right now he looks healthy. He's on a team, Nick, that we talk about teams being reinvigorated. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are one of those teams. Everybody is down on them, saying, how could you flip Rantanen? You know, you made a whole mess of this situation, which might be true. I probably would have handled it differently, but there's some proud players in that room. Rod Brind'Amour behind the bench. I think this Canes team doesn't exactly love hearing what's going on the outside, and they're playing some really good hockey right now on a nice little win streak, and Frederik Andersen's always solid when he's healthy, so I'm going to choose to trust Freddie here in the playoffs.
You guys are not going to believe this, but I am going to trust Freddie Andersen. You know why, Jake? Two words. Contract year. This guy wants to get paid.
I should have known. Yeah, I should have known contract year would factor in here. But look, both of us trusting Frederik Andersen, this could end up very, very dangerous at this point. I don't have him on any roster because I stopped trusting him a couple years ago. Yeah. But hey, this is the risk reward we talk about at the start of the year, right? You draft Frederik Andersen. Well, you didn't have him for most of the season, and now all of a sudden he's healthy for fantasy playoffs, and he could play a huge factor in who wins and loses your fantasy league here.
Delivered by Skip, picking up Vanacek as a handcuff or standalone. What are your thoughts on that? We just talked about the crease and turbulency, and I know he's with Florida now.
I don't mind it. I think if you're in a deep league, I don't mind that play at all. You'd have to pull up Florida's schedule, see if there's some back-to-back situations. But I do think they probably want to keep Bob fresh for the playoffs, as fresh as possible. And I think Vanacek in the right situation can actually succeed, Nick. Our perception of him is, playing on these bad teams behind bad blue lines, giving up 6-7 goals some nights. Florida's a different story. So I think he can actually have success there. And I certainly don't mind that play in a deep league or in the handcuff situation like the listener writes in. If you have Sergei Bobrovsky, I don't mind just having both Florida goaltenders and rolling that into the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, I think he's more of a streamer option for me. So that's been the first ever edition of Trust or Bust. Lastly, before we get to Tim Kalinowski here of Snapback Sports, the great chase, Jake, needs 9 goals in the final 17 games here, does Alex Ovechkin. Passed up a goal for his boy Alexi Protas' hat trick the other day. I love that.
Well, after I bet him live, plus 500 to score. As soon as the Caps took the lead, I'm like, okay, what's the Ovi line? Plus 500. Let's fire it up. Probably should have known Protas was sitting on Hattie watch, and I'm watching the game. I'm thinking, really, Ovi, we're gonna pass up empty nets now. We're doing this. He's never done this in his whole career, but I actually did love that. Betting aside, I thought that was a great moment and kind of shows you where the Capitals are as a team, and that can go a long way in the room. Everyone's trying to get Ovi the puck at all times, and then you watch that on the bench and you see Ovi setting up Protas for the hat trick, and it's all good vibes, it's all good smiles. I think that's a great thing for the Caps. Do you think he does it here, Nick, down the stretch? Now that we're getting really close, you think 9 and 17? You think he gets it done?
1,000%, and I wonder if he does do it, does he set off in the sunset and that's it? He's got 1 year left in his contract. Got people texting me already, 1 year left for Ovi. They're crying, they're sad. What if it happens this summer? He beats the record and that's it. He's back to Russia.
The guy loves scoring goals, Nick. I don't know. Maybe he wants to do that. Maybe he wants to go on.
He said he wants to play in Russia,
Yeah, right. And look, he probably could play in Russia till he's 47 years old because it's the KHL, right? It's not a physical league. He can just kind of float around, hang out 2 minutes on every power play. So he's got plenty of time, I think, if he wants to play in the KHL. But I hope Ovi sticks around in the NHL as long as possible. And hey, tries to go margin, right? Go way past Gretzky. You got these young guys that might come up 10 years from now. So keep building up that number, Ovi.
I don't want you to dash my hopes of doing a collab one day with KHL Fantasy on Ice. They have to have a fantasy pod, right? That's for sure. No?
Yeah, some guy named Igor and Pavel out there doing an NHL.
They for sure have an equivalent of Pete Jensen out in the KHL. There's no doubt. No doubt they have a producer, Bob Bender. They got clones out there, I'm telling you. It's now time for On the Money, brought to you by Bet365. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has concerns about gambling, visit ConnexOntario.ca as you bring in the one and only from Snapback Sports. It is Tim Kalinowski. Timmy K, what's going on, buddy? How are we?
Nothing much, guys. I just was, I'm going to add every Pavel and Evgeny real quick in my KHL league. So thank you guys for the tip.
You could be the betting insider for KHL Fantasy on Ice. And Bet365, I'm sure, will sponsor that as well. Why don't we start with the great chase, Alexander Ovechkin? How have you been playing him the last little while?
Well, Jake, I think it was you. I caught a clip of you on social saying bet him last goal scorer. That's been a bit of an OV secret for a long time. I mean, look, you were on it for sure. I kind of forgot about it because the guy's been around for so long. I feel like that's been a thing with Ovi for a while. But the thing I'm excited about is when he gets about 2 away. For work, I'm going to start chasing it. I'm going to be going to all the Capitals games. So I hope it just he doesn't sit at 2 for like 8 games, or he has like a game where he scores like 5 goals. That would ruin the chase for me. But I think the last goal scorer is the way to do it. And, look, I've been betting him a lot. Anytime goal scorer too. It's just fun to be involved. I want some stake in the game. So, count me in. I'm all in for it.
Yeah, I think the shot prop as well, guys. At this point, like you're paying juice for over 3.5 shots, but I almost think it's worth it. Like this guy's just going to keep firing, and if he's sitting on that number, you need one more shot late in the game. The empty netter will get that for you as well. So I think plenty of ways to bet this, Tim. That's awesome. You're going to be going to the games. I hope he doesn't make you wait too long. I have a feeling once he gets close, he's just going to get it done, guys. That they're just going to feed him. So I'm looking forward to once we get there, Tim. Now that the dust has settled on the trade deadline, I always like looking at Cup futures and those markets after the deadline because now we know what these rosters generally are going to look like come playoff time. So any value now that we've seen Dallas and Florida basically make that leap to being co-favorites most places here?
I actually did my homework. I felt like you guys were going to ask me that question. I finally came prepared. The way I would look at it is, look, I have a future on Vegas from the beginning of the season. And if you still are interested in the futures market, adding to the portfolio, I don't mind grabbing them at 10-1. But I'm also looking at Winnipeg as well. And what those two teams have in common is that they're leading their divisions. So they're going to likely get those 2 wildcard teams. I don't understand how you want to mess with Dallas, how you want to mess with Colorado, especially, that area specifically. Like, they might not make it out of the first round. It's going to be great theater for us, but I don't want to, Dallas, whatever it is, 5-1, 8-1 ticket that could be ripped up in the first 2 weeks. So to me, I'm kind of shocked to see Vegas and Winnipeg longer than them because I think their road is easier.
The Atlantic Division intrigues me, guys. I don't know who's going to win it, but you got Florida, Tampa, Toronto. Timmy, who wins the Atlantic for you?
Well, listen, Panthers, Leafs, Thursday night. If you like the Leafs or you don't quite know what to bet, how about just bet the Leafs to win the Atlantic? Plus 170. That's, if they win this game, they're going to be tied points-wise, right? And then I think the Leafs still have a game in hand. So to me, that's as good as betting this game. We obviously know Florida's situation with Ekblad, injuries. Leafs, I think they should be, Nick, you would know if they're closer to getting Tanev back. But to me, it seems like a very coin flip situation. And I hope you listen before Thursday night, because if you want the Leafs, just take them to win the division.
Well, and I completely agree with your other take there, Tim, about the futures market. I think my 2 favorite futures that are still available are Vegas 10-1 and Winnipeg hanging around 12-1. I think that's disrespect for the Jets at 12-1, a team that's been so consistent. And then you let Dallas and Colorado beat each other up in the first round. I actually love that number on the Jets. Any awards? Like we actually have some contentious awards, guys. Draisaitl's about a -150 favorite, something in that range. Cale Makar, this is great for Nick. Not even that big of a favorite to win the Norris right now. Zach Werenski right on his heels, Timmy. So is there any markets you'd still be interested in jumping in? Because it does feel like there's some awards up in the air here.
I'm still kicking myself for not getting involved in Werenski for the Norris. I bet this guy to have a point every other night, and it's always a pretty good number. And you just look, there it is, secondary assist, Werenski, thanks for coming, first period. But when you look at the awards market here, similar to how I said that you could take Toronto to win the division if you kind of like them tonight, I guess my question is like taking, say, Wolf to win the Calder. Is that kind of saying you think Calgary's going to make the playoffs? Like, I'm looking for some sort of correlation there. Like Dean Evison for Jack Adams. Is that a parlay of Columbus makes the playoffs? So I don't have a great, I wish I could see the crystal ball, but to me that part of the awards market is what I'm going to be doing a little more research into to see if that's basically a play on this team to make the playoffs.
So we talked about three-way season being here, Jake, a couple weeks ago. Under season is here. I'm playing a couple of unders. I know it's kind of boring to play, but Thursday night, Florida-Toronto, like the under in that game. Boston-Ottawa, like the under in that game. That's just the route I need to go, and I think it's important to talk about a game I'll certainly be watching on Sunday afternoon, Timmy. The Mikko Rantanen revenge return to Denver. The Avs hosting Dallas. I like the Rantanen shot prop. I like the ATG. And don't forget about Martin Necas, by the way.
I mean, Necas has had some great value on his numbers. It's just, I wish we could have a player traded to one of McKinnon's wings every other week, because there's that small window where the prices are really good. I think, well, look, I've been scared. I had the under in Buffalo, Detroit last night. So
nice. Good
yeah,
play.
that went really well. Got to go to bed early, guys. That's why I'm firing on all cylinders. But you know, when you look at those revenge spots or a game like Dallas and Colorado, I've been looking at goalie saves overs, which to me I love that sweat. I think it's a very, very fun sweat. So depending on what kind of form both teams are in by the time Sunday comes around, that'll be the side I'm leaning on either goalie saves over for me.
I love the goalie saves over, and you could even stack it. You could do the same game parlay over at Bet365. Take the goalie save over and then a player on the opposite team for a few shots, because, hey, if he's going to be making some saves, someone's going to be shooting. You could get a little extra plus money there on a same game parlay. Before we let you go, Timmy, are the Boston Bruins a little reinvigorated here post trade deadline? The roster's been kind of stripped down. All of a sudden, they're winning games. Pretty big number on them Thursday night against the Ottawa Senators. I don't mind a play on the Bruins here to see if they can keep this going.
Jake, shh. They're quietly risen from the dead here. It's really difficult for me to not take the Bruins at a plus money price here. I think I'm going to take it at like 6:58 Eastern time. I'm going to need a full day of convincing myself, but I do agree with you. That number is far too wide for a Bruins team that has finally showed a pulse. An Ottawa team that's played a lot of really tough games over the stretch here, which it's just difficult. It adds up on you.
All right, Timmy, excellent job today, and we'll talk soon, bud.
You guys are the best. Appreciate it.
Breaking news coming in from Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win, breakaway, pick six, three-point shot, underdog win, buzzer beater, shootout, walk-off, and absolutely every play in between is amazing. From football to basketball and hockey to baseball, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has concerns about gambling, visit ConnexOntario.ca. Jake, as we tie a bow on this one, looking ahead to next week, Monday, Week 22 waiver wire edition. And as you talked about off the top, some people starting their fantasy playoffs,
That's right. I'm getting ready for the fantasy playoffs, getting ready for the heartbreak, the upsets, everything that comes with it. Before we leave, Nick, my word of the day, pride. I mentioned it with Timmy K. The Boston Bruins showing some pride after losing players. There's some proud players on that Boston Bruins roster still. And same thing with the Carolina Hurricanes. Everybody's down on them. There's still some good players on that roster, and there's a path in the Metropolitan Division for that Canes team to still make some noise. So don't write off the Canes, and apparently don't write off the Bruins from still making the playoffs as well.
Sadly, I did not come equipped with a buzzword, so we're just going to leave it with Jake's final thoughts there. Pete Jensen back in the mix on Monday for the waiver wire edition. Again, don't forget to check out the latest edition of NHL Unscripted and Energy Line. Thank you to producer Phil Constantino. For Jake Hahn, I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip. Skip to the good part. Get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.